guys, it's Michelle, Deception Bytes, and I'm picking up from where we left off with the Q posts. And I bet I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, where have you been? I know. Well, I did mean to post yesterday, I really did, but when I started looking into what Q had posted, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Because it knocked the crap out of me. There's a lot of stuff here, and I had to come to the conclusion that, okay, I'm only one person, and I've already spent a lot of hours in researching this, and I'm one person. I'm not going to be able to know everything there is to know about every post, because some of these posts really, it could take a year to look into them all, to look into every nuance of every post, because there's so much. Like, it boggles my mind how much information Q has actually dropped, over these last few months. But let's get to her. Let's just shake and bake, and I'll try not to be all chit chatty. All right. Now I'm gonna have to break this into two tonight because there's too much, and it would end up being, the mother of all videos. So we don't want that. So let's start here, and this was on April 23rd, and today is April 24th. It's 6:33 Eastern Standard Time. So I will plan on bringing you totally up to date tonight, but I'm going to have to break it into two, and I'm going to have to run an errand in between. So again, anyway, April 23rd, Q says, reminder, Iran is next. Marker, classified section 11A P 2.2. Now, if I had all the time back that I've wasted looking for this, well, I'd have a lot of time back. That's all I can say. But let's go take a look at this link. I wasn't able to find out what that was or where it was. Now, thought this was interesting because he's been mentioning Iraq. Hang on here. He's been mentioning, Iran, and suddenly we've got it in the news, which is not at all unlike Q. That happens every time. But let's listen to what the president has to say.
To Iran, especially look at what they're doing in Iraq. You just take a look at what's happening in virtually any place in the Middle East. Iran is behind it. So what kind of a deal is this where it wasn't even discussed? And I know John Kerry made the statement that he didn't want to discuss other things while he was making the deal. Despite all of the money that we gave them, he didn't want to discuss it because it was too complicated. That's not the way to do it, because it was too complicated. So we made this terrible deal, but we'll be discussing it.
The Iranians say they'll restart their nuclear program if the deal
We'll find out. You'll find out about that. It won't be so easy for them to restart.
Mr. President,
They're not going to be restarting anything. They restart it, they're going to have big problems, bigger than they've ever had before. And you can mark it down. They restart their nuclear program, they will have bigger problems than they have ever had before. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
I like his leadership style, to tell you the truth. I know everybody puts him down, but he is a no-nonsense guy, and you don't have to wonder where he stands on something. He just out with it, I personally like that, but let's go back here. Not there yet. Now, so Iran is next, and we've been told that, and here it is. So we've got this whole huge debacle with the Iran deal. So we're going to get into that a bit. Now, Q is saying that this is a marker. He also pointed this out. I have tried, and really it's unusual for me not to find something, but I cannot find this. And if anybody knows what this is or what this refers to, please leave a link down below, because I'm frustrated that I couldn't find it, because I did waste a lot of time looking for it. Now, the next thing Q says is installments. And then he says 250 billion. I assume that's billion. That would be my assumption, and probably anybody else's assumption that looks at that. And he says January 1st, June 1st. That's a 6-month period in there, but I don't know, again, what this is referring to. I looked up everything to do with money sent to Iran. I could not find that sum, 250 billion. I found all sorts of other different sums. I could not find that as part of an installment. So I'm not sure where he's headed here. But if I know Q, and I think by this time I know a little bit about him, him, her, they, I'm pretty sure that he's going to come back and visit this, because that's always the way. He drops something and he sees if we get it. And if we don't get it, he drops a little more. And he will until we do get it. That's just the way he works. He's more interested in us understanding it than he is in being cryptic. You know, people say what they will, but he's really wanting us to get this. It's just that when he's cryptic like that, it forces us to search, and I learn a lot just in the search. So, anyway, now, here he says no inspection at GZNR sites. Now, this, again, is something that I had a difficult time with, and it was like a wall to me. And last night I thought, okay, I'm not ready to come and bring a video, because I don't want to just read these to you. I mean, you can do that for yourself. So I was pretty sure this was nuclear because of the context of the rest of the post. And you have to take the whole post into context. So I'm pretty sure that NR is nuclear. Well, GZ, what could that stand for? And I looked up Iran's nuclear sites, but they actually only have one functioning site, and it has nothing to do with this. And then I found out about Global Zero nuclear sites. I had never heard this before. Maybe you guys have. Maybe I'm just behind with this, but I had never heard this before. Now, Global Zero, a world without nuclear weapons. Global Zero is the international movement for the elimination of all nuclear weapons. Its members understand that the only way to eliminate the nuclear threat, including proliferation, nuclear terrorism, and humanitarian catastrophe, is to stop the spread of nuclear weapons, secure all nuclear materials, and eliminate all nuclear weapons. Global Zero. The movement combines cutting-edge policy development and direct dialogue with governments, with public outreach, including media, online, and grassroots initiatives to make the elimination of nuclear weapons an urgent global imperative. Since its launch in Paris in December 2008, it has grown to include 300 world leaders and 500,000 citizens worldwide, hosted 4 Global Zero summits it's hosted 4 Global Zero summits and numerous regional conferences, built an international student movement with more than 175 campus chapters in 29 countries, produced an acclaimed documentary, Countdown to Zero, with the team behind An Inconvenient Truth, launched cutting-edge international campaigns in key countries, and produced compelling high-production videos to reach millions of people worldwide with an empowering call to action. Now, it's interesting to me, first of all, there's 300 world leaders involved, so this is not, I'm absolutely gobsmacked that I've never heard of it. So, the other thing that I noticed in here, and I'm not going to read all of this, this is something that you can look up if you want additional information on it, but An Inconvenient Truth, the same people that produced An Inconvenient Truth produced Countdown to Zero. So it's this movement that produced that, and it's interesting that Q just mentioned Al Gore, and that's the first time. I don't know if Q has ever mentioned Al Gore before. Maybe he has. He may have, but this is one of the only times. So it's, what are the chances that I'm running into Al Gore's name. Oh, his name isn't here, but his movie, An Inconvenient Truth, is in there. And, that Q just mentioned him. Maybe it's nothing, or maybe there's a tie there. I don't know. But let's continue. So, once I understood what global zero nuclear sites are, then I understood the rest of that was kind of a key for unlocking the rest of it to me, because he's saying there's no inspection at global zero nuclear sites. So, I'm not sure, and this would take further study on my part or anyone else's part that's interested in looking into it. I'm not sure if Iran is part of this global zero. I'm not sure, but if they are, then part of that is saying that they are is promising that they are not using their facilities to make nuclear weapons, right? But there's no one inspecting. There's no inspection. So how do we know? And I was reading, because I read oh my gosh, a huge amount about Iran's nuclear capacity, because they do produce nuclear energy, which is fine. They can produce, well, I personally don't agree with nuclear energy, but that's just me. But they're producing that energy and selling it, and that's fine. However, they were also enriching uranium up to 90%. And so basically the argument was, well, there's nothing to prevent them from enriching the uranium to weapons grade. And I've just been reading all this different stuff about this because I really wanted to understand what Q was talking about here. And this post right here is the one that caused me the most issue. So that makes sense. There's no inspection at these sites. Even like Iran can say anything they want. They can say, oh, no, we don't have weapons. We're not enriching uranium. We're not doing any of that stuff. But there's no inspection. So what do we just take them at their word? And so then Q says no missile tech prevention. There's nothing in place to prevent elements of Iran's nuclear program being used for military purposes. There's nothing in place. So they have the nuclear capacity there. They're producing nuclear energy. So what's in place to prevent them from using the nuclear program for military purposes? Nothing, absolutely nothing. So, and then Q says load carrying, and he's meaning nuclear payloads need uranium, but Iran is allowed a certain amount of uranium. Now, I think they agreed to export all their uranium out of the country, but I don't know what's going on with that. I mean, do we believe them? Like, I don't know. There's a lot to this, and there's a lot more than I can dig up in even several hours. There's a lot. It's complicated as far as I'm concerned. Maybe somebody else is looking at that and saying, well, it's not complicated at all. And maybe they have a better insight into that. And if you do, please leave comments, because I've never claimed to have all the answers. And then Q says ICBM, which is intercontinental ballistic missile. So that's the fear. That's the fear that they're developing intercontinental ballistic missiles, missiles capable of carrying a payload, a nuclear payload, and because there's nothing to prevent it. They can say whatever they want. But if there's no inspection, how do we know? Now, then Q says, think North Korea. Who controls the money? Clowns. Who really controls the money? Really? Clowns. I guess. That's, in North Korea, that's what Q told us, right? That the clowns were controlling the money there. And so he's really saying that it's the same in Iran. The clowns are in control. So why does the EU have a vested interest in this deal? Well, the deal was negotiated between Iran and a group of counterparts that included the US, Russia, Britain, Germany, France, China, and the EU. Now, the supporters of the nuclear deal affirm benefits which include the best possible guarantee from Iran that it will refrain from producing a nuclear arsenal. It was, at the time, an important step towards establishing peace in the Middle East region. Lifting sanctions would allow the movement of huge supplies of oil from Iran, which was thought to be sitting on large stockpiles due to years of imposed sanctions. International oil companies like France's Total and Norway's Statoil operated in Iran for years before sanctions were imposed. So and also the European car manufacturers like Pugo, is that how you pronounce that? Pugo, I believe, and Volkswagen were market leaders in Iran prior to the sanctions. So there is a lot of stuff vested in the deal. Most notably, peace in the Middle East. So yeah, they do have a vested interest in the deal, and I understand that. And certainly Q understands that, and most certainly Trump does. Now, who receives the money? And I put, that is the point. Where is the relief money going? And we're going to look at that in a second here. I wanted to put that in red so you know that's mine. And then Q doesn't just leave that hanging out there. He gives us a little bit of guidance what he's talking about. He says, when the U.S. sends billions in aid and or climate and or etc., who or what entity audits / tracks to confirm intended recipients received? Well, that's a really good question, isn't it? When we're sending all this millions and billions in aid over there for climate change or to help grow their nuclear energy program, because that's not a bad thing. Them having nuclear energy isn't a bad thing. It's only, but if it's being inspected fairly recent or fairly often at intervals to, assure that they're not doing other things with their nuclear energy, then there's nothing wrong with that. And I know that the U.S. has contributed to all sorts of things with Iran, not just Iran, I mean worldwide. And so what is in place there to track that, when you send something to a country, how do you know? If you say, okay, well, I'm sending over $2 billion to aid education in this country, how do you know that that's what they used it for? Well, we don't. There's no checks and balances in place. None. So let's go look at this link here. Well, look at this. The U.S. is helping Iran fund chaos in the Middle East. The White House refuses to acknowledge the obvious. Now, this is not the Trump White House. This is the Obama White House. This was September 27th, 2016. Would the White House knowingly transfer tens of billions of dollars to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and Hezbollah in Lebanon to finance the slaughter of Syrians or the next war against Israel? In theory, the Iran nuclear deal wasn't supposed to fuel Iran's imperialism and its ardent anti-Semitism. And yet, President Barack Obama appears to have done exactly what he and Secretary of State John Kerry promised not to do. They are directly financing the Syrian horror show and terrorists on Americans' watch lists. During the nuclear negotiations and since reaching the agreement with Iran, the administration has strenuously rejected congressional concerns that sanctions relief would fund the mullahs' malign activities. CIA Director John Brennan said again this July that Iran had used much of sanctions relief for development projects. The money, the revenue that's flowing into Iran is being used to support its currency, to provide monies to the departments and agencies, build up its infrastructure. The administration's assurances are undercut by Iran's own belief since July 2015. General Joseph Votel, commander of U.S. Central Command said that Iran has become more aggressive in the days since the nuclear agreement. The regime is keeping Bashar al-Assad afloat in Syria and actively supports Lebanese Hezbollah, which has a $150,000 rocket stockpile or 150,000 rocket stockpile with only one target, Israel. Tehran has expanded its efforts to create Shiite militias in the Middle East and has continued to send aid, including weaponry, to radical Palestinian groups. For all of these endeavors, the regime needs money, liquid, untraceable, convertible, and easy to transfer. According to the Global Anti-Money Laundering Financial Action Task Force, cross-border cash transfers are one of the main methods used to move illicit funds and finance terrorism. The mullahs have been hungry for cash after American and European sanctions drastically curtailed the regime's access to hard currency. In 3 shipments in January and February, the United States transferred $1.7 billion in cash to Iran, ostensibly to settle a 30-year military claim before the Iran-United States Claims Tribunal, as the administration was finally forced to acknowledge under intense congressional and media scrutiny the first installment of $400 million was part of a tightly scripted exchange timed to the release of American hostages. In rejecting congressional accusations that he had authorized a ransom payment, Obama justified the transfer by citing the severity of remaining sanctions. The reason that we had to give them cash, Obama argued, is precisely because we are so strict in maintaining sanctions. We could not wire the money. The president, however, is wrong. U.S. regulations permit all transactions between the American and Iranian financial systems related to tribunal settlements. Moreover, Washington wired payments to Iran in July 2015 and again in April 2016, further disproving the president's statement. Well, are we shocked that Obama lied? I'm just floored. It is certainly possible that banks were unwilling to wire the $1.7 billion no matter what guarantees they got from the administration. Banks have a healthy fear of sanctions and their penalties. If so, it raises a troubling question. How did Tehran receive the billions of dollars in sanctions relief released under both the interim and final nuclear agreements? And I'm just seeing if I should continue reading this or not. Well, I'll just read the conclusion here. Alternatively, if this money went through the formal financial systems, the administration is not being truthful about why it had to send the $1.7 billion in cash. If formal channels were used for the other $31.9 billion, why not wire the tribunal money to an official Iranian account at a European central bank, where Tehran could access the funds to pay for current European imports or other legitimate economic needs? With financial controls to minimize the risk of money laundering and terror financing, these formal channels would be more difficult for the Revolutionary Guard to subvert. So there you go. Certainly not the Trump administration, but the Obama administration helping Iran fund chaos. And that's not anything we didn't know, but it's good to have a healthy reminder there. Excuse me, just one moment. All right. So we know that there's no accountability for the money. And how does George Soros fund worldwide counter events? I don't know why I asked the question again there in red. Well, a number of ways. Illegally, through foundations, through places like Clinton Foundation, all these foundations where they can launder money, through illegal and illicit activities, drug smuggling, guns, gun running, organ transplants, organ trafficking, trafficking children, all sorts of ways. And we know that. So who funds worldwide leftist events? Well, indirectly, in some ways, we are. And Q confirms that we're on the right page there because he says American taxpayer subsidize. Yeah, we do indirectly subsidize it. Now, he says define nuclear standoff. Well, if you and I are a country, and I have nuclear power and you have nuclear power, well, neither one of us are going to press that button, are we? Because we know that it means the mutual destruction of us both, and destruction of the planet as a whole, really, in some cases. So that's really what a nuclear standoff is. Who benefits? Nobody, really, because I don't really see anybody benefiting except that both. It would be worse if, if you had a nuclear weapon and I didn't. Like, that would put me at a pretty bad position because I would be very vulnerable to takeover. But I don't know who benefits. How do you squeeze funds out of the U.S.? And then Q tells us how, right down here, you either threaten either humanity or the environment. If you say, well, if we don't stop the CO2 emissions in such and such many years, we will cease to exist. Well, that's a threat. That's a big threat. That's something that we need to do something about right now. And you'll be able to squeeze the funds out of people because they'll want to contribute to that. Or if you say, if there's a threat to humanity, there's a worldwide virus or whatever, it's pretty easy to squeeze funds out for something like that. So Q is saying environment push, and yes, there's a worldwide environmental push, and yes, we do need to be concerned about the environment, so don't misunderstand what I'm saying. We most certainly do, but in a lot of ways this environmental push is a grab for money, and it's money that can't be traced, really. It's not accounted for, is what I'm saying. It's not accounted for. Well, we're going to see here in a minute. Now, he says, think Paris Accord. So what is the Paris Accord? Let's go take a look. Well, it's also called the Paris Climate Agreement. Syria and Nicaragua, the only remaining non-signatories of the Paris Agreement on climate change, have now signed. Should the U.S. leave as promised, it would be the only country in the world outside of the agreement. And Trump has threatened to get us out of that agreement. He said, we're getting out. It was with these words that Donald Trump signified the United States' break from the Paris Agreement on climate change. In a statement from the Rose Garden in Washington, D.C., when was this? This was 7th of November 2017 that this was written. In a statement from the Rose Garden in Washington, D.C., Trump announced that the United States would be withdrawing its support from the accord, but would begin negotiations to re-enter the Paris Agreement or an entirely new transaction that would be more fair to the U.S. economy. As someone who cares deeply about the environment, I cannot in good conscience support the deal, Trump said, noting that the Paris Agreement was blocking the development of clean coal in America. In 2016, the Paris Agreement marked a turning point in the battle against climate change. World leaders from across the globe united for the first time in history to legally ratify action against pollution through the United Nations Framework Convention. Throughout his presidential campaign, however, Donald Trump has promised to reverse the United States' green energy policies. Trump's decision goes against the urgings of the EU and the Chinese government, which both solidified their commitment to the deal in light of the United States' decision. Several prominent U.S. firms, including Microsoft, Apple, Google, and Facebook, also pleaded with Trump to remain in the agreement. Elon Musk, meanwhile, said he's leaving Trump's advisory council due to the decision. Now, part of this is, the rich countries, are basically paying, if you're a poor country and you can't afford to have, green policies, like you can't afford to install solar panels, and you can't afford to not have coal, and you can't afford clean energy, then the countries, the biggest countries, US being one of them, have to give that money to that country to help it develop that, because in that way it helps the whole earth, right? Now that makes sense on many levels, because if you're a little podunk country that is barely feeding your people and you're told, okay, you can't be burning this coal, you've got to, we've got to switch to clean energy, we've got to, you've got to install solar panels, you've got to do all this stuff, you've got to, start recycling, blah, blah, blah. Well, where does the money for that come from? They're not even feeding their people. Well, it comes from you and I, taxpayers, and we're paying because our country is large and is contributing more to pollution than, say, that small country. So they're not able to pay their share, so we pay their share for them. But in sending money to that country, there's no tracking. How do we know that country is spending that money on what they say? And see, this is a big, huge loophole. So we're sending money over to Iran to help them develop clean energy. Well, how do we know they're not developing nuclear technology with it? We don't. So I understand the conundrum. I really do. And that's what the conundrum is. So let's go back here. So then he says, who audits or tracks the funneled money? No one. No one. Unlike traditional foreign aid, where government money is redirected to poorer countries or aid organizations working there, the US and the EU would arrange for billions to flow from a variety of sources, public and private, into poorer countries unable to pay the effect climate change, pay to affect climate change. So they can't pay, so, our taxpayers' money, private corporations and everything are going to funnel billions into these countries with no accountability. Hello? Some of the officials in these countries are corrupt as all get out. It's going to go into their pockets. You know that. And countries like Iran, how do we know it's not going into their nuclear, to funding their nuclear capabilities? We don't. And of course, we want to support them having nuclear energy, but not nuclear weapons. So, it's interesting. Define kickback: a payment made to someone who has facilitated a transaction or appointment. So, is someone getting kickbacks for this money? I don't know. But then he says, define slush fund. Well, a slush fund, also known as a black fund, is a fund or account maintained for corrupt or illegal purposes, especially in the political sphere. Such funds may be kept hidden and maintained separately from other funds that are used for legitimate purposes. They may be employed by government or corporate officials as part of efforts to discreetly pay influential people in return for preferential treatment, advance information, for example, to acquire non-public information in financial transactions or some other service. The funds themselves may not be kept secret, but the source of the funds or how they were acquired or what purposes they will be used for may be hidden. Use of slush funds to influence government activities may be viewed as subversive of the democratic process. Yeah. So then, Q drills right down to what he's talking about. The EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, has a slush fund. And we know that slush fund is up to no good, Lucy. No good. Because we know that is the slush fund that Sessions is doing away with. So, and then Q says, no oversight regarding Obama. And yes, this was introduced under Obama, this EPA slush fund, and had virtually no oversight at all. So who knows? how much money flowed through there. We don't. And then Q says, why? Well, he's about to tell us. How does the CIA fund non-sanctioned ops? Well, drugs, weapons, human trafficking, and apparently slush funds. Yep. Off the books? Of course it's off the books. You know, that whole slush fund could have been used to fund all sorts of things like the Fast and Furious, all sorts of things. And we won't know. We won't know how many people were killed actually as a result of the money of that slush fund not having accountability. Even if it did have accountability, it would depend on who was in charge of it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, even if there was some accountability, if you've got corrupt people in there, well, it's kind of an oxymoron then, you know, because corrupt people aren't accountable. So, in some senses. Anyway, off the books. Yep, off the books. Reread past drops. And he's talking about past drops regarding this whole situation. And it wasn't that long ago that we went over this, so I think it probably is fresh in everyone's memory. He says, will become relevant. So he's giving us a heads up that there's more about this coming up. Welcome, Mr. President. The U.S. will not agree to continue the Iran deal as it currently stands. Q. And I like that. You know, welcome, Mr. President. Yeah. They're welcoming in, when they welcomed in Trump, they welcomed in somebody that was going to stand up to this crap and clean it up. And like him or hate him, you've got to agree he is cleaning house. So now let's take a look at this link. Just because we can. I might have to split this into 3. I'm still on the first post. I told you, it's like it knocked the stuffing out of me. Okay, I like this because I know you're going to look at that and say, who are you calling a dummy? It's called The Dummy's Guide to the Iran Nuclear Deal. My mama never raised no dummies. No, I'm not calling anybody a dummy, but they did break it down very, very nicely. And sometimes I was always told that if you could not break something down so a 5-year-old could understand it, then you don't understand it. I've always been told that. And there's a lot of truth to that because, you know, the smartest people do not try to confuse people. And so this, although it's, you know, the Dummy's Guide to the Iran Nuclear Deal, it's broken down so well that, you know, anyone could understand it. And I like that. I respect that. Okay. A historical record or a historical mistake depends on whom you ask and what they had at stake. After months of preparation, 2 weeks of final intensive discussions in Vienna with 8 parties involved, the final result was a 159-page agreement with 5 annexes. The Iran nuclear deal made headlines across the globe as a landmark historical agreement between extreme opponents. 2015 was just the start. The deal laid out a lengthy process spanning over 15 to 25 years that would be supervised by an 8-member committee, including Iran, the United States of America, Britain, France, Germany, Russia, China, and the European Union. In a nutshell, the agreed-upon nuclear deal aimed at limiting Iran's ability to produce a nuclear weapon in exchange for the removal of various sanctions imposed on it internationally. However, in 2017, the deal got a significant shakeup under U.S. President Donald Trump. Based on the revelations of an Iranian exile group in 2002, Iran was suspected to have nuclear facilities. Following inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency and subsequent discoveries, Iran continued to proceed with nuclear developments despite international opposition. In 2006, the United Nations imposed sanctions on Iran, which were followed by similar actions from the U.S. and the EU. Preceding this, bitter confrontations broke out between Iran and the world powers. These sanctions, primarily on Iran's oil business, weapons sales, and financial transactions, had severely hurt Iran's economy. As one of the largest producers of crude oil, prices went through a volatile period as the outcome was largely unknown. The deal was negotiated between Iran and a group of counterparts that included, okay, we already went through that, and the supporters of the nuclear deal affirm benefits which include the best possible guarantee from Iran that it will refrain from producing a nuclear arsenal. It was, at that time, an important step towards establishing peace in the Middle East region. So, to make nuclear bombs, the uranium ore mined from Earth needs enrichment to either uranium-235 or plutonium. Uranium ore mined from Earth is processed via devices called centrifuges to create uranium-235. Uranium ore is processed in the nuclear reactors, which transforms it into plutonium. Under the deal, Tehran would reduce the number of centrifuges to 5,000 at the Nahant's uranium plant, half of the current number. Nationwide, the number of centrifuges would reduce from 19,000 to 6,000. The enrichment levels would be brought down to 3.7%, which was much lower than the 90% needed to make a bomb. The stockpile for the low enrichment uranium would be capped to 300 kilograms for the next 15 years, down from the present 10,000 kilograms. All these measures serve to restrict Iran's capability to make a nuclear bomb and would ensure nuclear power usage is limited to civilian use only, meaning, power. As the deal was finalized, a UN Secretary Council resolution was agreed upon. By August 15, 2015, Iran would submit written responses to the questions raised by the International Atomic Energy Agency about its nuclear program and developments. Additionally, it allowed monitoring of its facilities by IAEA inspectors on or before October 15, 2015. First, the oil embargo that prevented the import of oil from Iran was removed. The U.S. and EU lifted oil trade-related sanctions. Foreign companies began to purchase oil from Iran. U.S. companies located outside the U.S. were authorized to trade with Iran, and imports of selected items from Iran were permitted. Simultaneously, sanctions on Iran's banking and financial systems were dropped. It enabled the immediate release of around $100 billion currently lying frozen in Iranian bank accounts overseas. Immediately after the announcement, government officials from major European countries began visits to Iran to explore business opportunities. Some of the main challenges faced by Iran during the sanction period were Iran's shrinking GDP, high inflation. Let me see, I want to go down to here to where, okay. Let's go to key concerns. Former U.S. President Barack Obama claimed the deal would make U.S. and the world a safer place. However, concerns remained. Challenges included administrating and monitoring the atomic facilities and developments in Iran. Complete awareness was required about the existing labs, establishments, underground sites, research centers, and military bases associated with nuclear development. Though Iran agreed to provide the IAEA higher levels of information and deeper levels of access to all nuclear programs and facilities in the country, the picture remained murky. So they weren't holding up their end of the deal to be completely transparent about what was going on and allow people to inspect and to see. So the opposition, the deal, although welcomed by a large group of nations across the globe, also had opposition from a few prominent world leaders. Israeli leader Netanyahu said the deal paves Iran's path to the bomb. And he's right in a sense. His vehement opposition to the deal came on the basis of Iran's history of being a nuclear-capable challenge for the Middle East region. Additionally, Netanyahu said the deal was a platform to fund and nurture a nuclear-capable religious extremist country, saying a strengthened Iran could hinder peace and security in the region. Now, let's enter President Trump. After the election of President Trump in November 2016, proponents of the deal feared the agreement, which they saw as a win for world peace, would be back on the table. And in October 2017, their fears were confirmed. Trump announced that he would decertify the deal. What did this mean? Under the terms, the U.S. president was required to sign off on the deal every 90 days, which he announced he would not do, accusing Iran of sponsoring terrorism. Trump said he would deny Iran all paths to a nuclear weapon. Not surprising, Trump's decision was met with instant condemnation. The European Union Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini was the first to weigh in, saying the deal was robust and said there had been no violations of any of the commitments in the agreement. But that's not true. There have been. So after Trump's decision, Congress has 60 days to reinforce sanctions, and given the hostility within the Republican Party, an agreement to reinstate may be possible. The pros and cons of such a landmark deal were and will continue to be debated. Most views, claim, and allegations are often politically tuned. For now, the majority across the globe appear to be positive about the Iran nuclear deal. However, after President Trump decertified the agreement, the future became murkier. So there you go. There's something up with Iran, and this is what's at the surface of it, is this Iran deal that we're getting a raw deal because we're not able to go in and make sure that they're holding up their end of the bargain, and yet we've lifted sanctions and they're benefiting from it. So really, when Trump says we're getting nothing for this, he's right. So that's that. Now let's go back. So the U.S. will not agree to continue the Iran deal as it currently stands. Q. And that's just the way it is. So let's push forward. I can't believe we got through that post. That post just about whipped me. Okay. Now, the next one, bit of good news. Q says, do you believe the world is awakening? Coincidence? Now, he asked coincidence because I stuck this little post up here. I stuck this in there. That's a former post by Q from April 15th, where he said, the clown unidentified IDs are in here, meaning on the board, the 8chan board. And he said they're there from Armenia. And then he says, Google QAnon search stats by country. Armenia, number 1. So he's saying, is it a coincidence that I was just mentioning Armenia as being, the number 1 search for that country? I've also heard that QAnon, spelt with a U, is an instrument there, which could account for it as well. But there's probably a lot of CIA agents there. And so, they're probably wanting to find out about Q. So that's probably why it's so high in the search engine. Well, it's number 1. Okay, so let's go out here and see what he wants us to take a look at concerning Armenia. Armenia opposition leader demands snap election after PM resigns. So he stepped down amid protests, said he will not be involved in required solutions to unrest. And the people have taken to the street, and they're pretty happy about this. Armenia's opposition leader has demanded a snap parliamentary election in the wake of former Prime Minister, I can't say his names, resignation over widespread anti-government demonstrations. So this is what Q was alluding to, but we're going to find out. I'm not going to go through all this, but we're going to find out why Q wanted us to know this. And he says the world is awakening. So let's go back up to the next one. And Q, in referring to his own tweet here, the tweet that we just covered, says, why was Armenia mentioned recently? Clowns losing control. So he asks a question, then he answers it. Why was Armenia mentioned recently? Clowns losing control. Q. Now, here's the good news. Let's go up here. This is from an Anon that posted this. Thousands of people are on the streets cheering and hugging each other, jumping up and down, honking their horns. Things happen so quickly. I don't think the crowd was expecting this, but it is exactly what they wanted, Forestier Walker said. We saw soldiers take to the streets. We saw priests, children, and their parents, young and old, coming out to show Armenia was really united in wanting these changes. This is an indication of how much people in Armenia have realized that they had the power to affect change in a system that was widely regarded as corrupt. Now, and this, he makes this Anon also refers to the same news article that we just went out to, and then he reiterates, thousands of people are on the streets cheering and hugging each other, jumping up and down, honking their horns. Things happen so quickly. Amazing, Q. And Q responds to this post above and says, like North Carolina. Oh my gosh, I don't know where that comes from. Like North Korea, they have been fired. Oh my God. I'm just making my own stuff up now. I'm just reading whatever I want to read into it. Like North Korea, they have been freed. They have been freed, like North Korea. Remember when North Korea, and they said, okay, they're free now. And Q said assets on the ground. And of course, we know what that means. It means their assets are on the ground. Q. Good news. They haven't been fired, though. They weren't fired. They were just freed. All right. So here's the next one from Q. And he says, think Saudi Arabia. Now, sorry, this should be in red. Think Saudi Arabia. Order is important. Saudi Arabia, then North Korea. So Saudi Arabia was freed and then North Korea. North Korea was freed and then Armenia. Armenia is freed and next will be Iran. Now, he's saying that the order is important, and it probably is. The takedown order was probably very important because if you took others out before others, who knows what could have happened. But I think they know what they're doing. And then he says, so it's Armenia, then Iran, then question mark. Well, any other rogue nuclear states? Well, I'm going to take Cuba out of there because Cuba doesn't have nuclear, but Pakistan. I would say Libya and Pakistan. Now, I don't know. There may be others. If you can think of any others, rogue nuclear states, not just rogue states, because we've got lots of rogue states. But do they have nuclear capabilities? I believe Libya does, but I'm not sure. I know Pakistan does. So then Q says, define hostage. A person seized or held as security for the fulfillment of a condition. So, I take you hostage and I say, okay, I tell your wife or your husband or your girlfriend or boyfriend, okay, you give me $100 and I'll let them go. Well, it depends, I might be more than that. Anyway, and then it says define protection. A person or thing that prevents someone or something from suffering harm or injury. Who is protected by rogue nuclear states? Well, only the rogue state itself, I would assume, is being protected. The rest of the world isn't, because they don't trust them. But in the eyes of the rogue state, having nuclear capability assures their continuation, not being taken over or whatever. But it also can lead to other people thinking, okay, well, are they gonna, take over the state next to them? Or are they gonna, what are they gonna do? So I would say that only the rogue state itself is protected. Trust the plan. The world is connected. Why are border states like Arizona, California important? Well, because of the trafficking, weapons, drugs, clown infiltration, MS-13, drug cartels, gosh, any number of things. Why is Mexico vocal against the POTUS? Because we're holding them accountable, and there's a lot of infiltration there, and who knows, if the government is corrupt there or not. We don't know. They may be taking kickbacks from all these drug cartels, and we don't know. But they don't want to be held accountable for what's coming over their borders. That's for darn sure. Those who are the loudest. Now, it's interesting. When he said that, it reminded me of the play Hamlet, because in Hamlet, there's that line where methinks the lady doth protest too much. And I've used that many times in my life, because if somebody, is too loud or too vocal about something, it usually draws attention that they might be involved, or they might have something to do with it, or they may be lying. So there really is something to that. Methinks the lady doth protest too much. So, yeah. Now, who exactly this is referring to, I don't know. Maybe Mexico, since he just mentioned it. Where we go one, we go all. The Great Awakening. Iron Eagle. Q. Now, this isn't the only time that Iron Eagle has been used. He's used it many times. And if I'm not mistaken, I didn't go back out to look at this again, but if I'm not mistaken, they go into a country to rescue a hostage. So I don't know. I really don't know what Iron Eagle is referring to yet, but we will. Let's continue. Now, this Anon posts this. Just don't forget about the Americans, boss. Make America great again. And Q responds, happening now. Q. Happening now. Now, Q refers to his own post above where he says happening now. And he says happy hunting. And he provides a link to the UN.org. Their auditors, they have an auditor board that audits all sorts of, let's take a look. Let's take a boo at it. Hang on. Well, that's not where I was. I was in here somewhere. I don't know. Anyway, they audit all sorts of things like nonprofit organizations and blah, blah, blah. And, here, let's do this. Board's mandate. The General Assembly established the United Nations Board of Auditors to audit the accounts of the United Nations organization and its funds and programs, and to report its findings and recommendation to the Assembly through the Advisory Committee on Administration and Budgetary Questions. So all these different UN organizations are audited. So, yeah. Now, there's more coming up about that. All right. Now, Q responds to this post that he just, made, happy hunting, and gives us that link. And he says, wake up, learn, question, fight. Now, let's take a boo at this. We already know this, but report. Red Cross spent 25% of Haiti donations on internal expenses. Only 25%? They're so corrupt, I would have thought they'd spend more. The American Red Cross spent a quarter of the money people donated after the 2010 Haiti earthquake, or almost 125 million on its own internal expenses, far more than the charity previously had disclosed, according to the report released Thursday by Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley. The report also says the charity's top officials stonewalled congressional investigators and released incomplete information about its Haiti program to the public. It concludes there are substantial and fundamental concerns about the Red Cross as an organization. You think? The report follows a nearly year-long investigation by the Iowa Republican and his staff launched after coverage by NPR and ProPublica of the Red Cross Haiti response. The venerated charity raised nearly $500 million after the disaster, more than any other nonprofit, but an ambiguous plan to build housing resulted in just 6 permanent homes. 6! Wow! 500 million, 6 homes? It sounds about right. You know, if you're building homes for Nancy Pelosi or Maxine Waters, or sure, I could see that. Okay. Other findings, the charity insisted to congressional investigators that $70 million spent on program expenses included funds to oversee and evaluate its Haiti programs, but Grassley's office has found that the charity is unable to provide any financial evidence that oversight activities, in fact, occurred. Red Cross CEO Gail McGovern told Grassley's office the charity gave the Government Accountability Office everything they asked for during an earlier review. The report, however, says the organization did not provide everything requested, contrary to Ms. McGovern's multiple claims that it did. The Red Cross has kept the charity's own internal investigations and ethics units severely undermanned and underfunded, the report says, and the charity appears to be reluctant to support the very unit that it is designed to police wrongdoing within the organization. Yeah. So, won't get into all this because it's a lot, and we already know about some of the corruption there, and yeah. It's bad news. Bad news. And I already knew that before all this Q stuff because of being involved in organizing some relief after Hurricane Mitch hit Central America. Honduras was very, very badly hit, and other countries. And yeah, Red Cross, useless. They collect a lot of money. They do nothing. And where does the money that they collect go? Where does it go? Oh, there it is. See? I know this is blurry, but there's all the money. Oh, all these boxes. International Committee for Red Cross. Yeah, look at that. And look at all those steel things full of money. Money. What are they doing with? I wonder how many people they feed with that. Yeah. Tasty money. Tasty little money nuggets. And where does your money go? Right there. There it is. The Red Cross is a Rothschild money laundering front. Oh, really? Giving 5% of donations to charity while spreading, I'm sorry, I'm reading upside down, while spreading incurable diseases. Oh, I didn't know that. That's something I want to look into. I've never heard that before. And you thought you were helping the helpless. No. The poor people at Walmart, they were collecting donations through Red Cross not that long ago. And she asked, would you like to make a donation to the Red Cross today? And I said, no. And it scared her. I felt bad afterwards. I said, oh, I'm sorry. No offense. But yeah, just, and how many people, I mean, I know when I shop at PetSmart or whatever, you know, and they say on every time you swipe your little card, it'll say, do you want to make a, $1 donation, $2 donation, whatever, to homeless pets? And I always push, an amount to add to my bill because I don't even notice it, and it goes to a good cause. And probably the Red Cross, working through Walmart and things like that, make a killing. They make a killing because if you're spending $200 at Walmart, what's $1 or $2 to the Red Cross? But $1 here, $1 there makes the Red Cross a very, very wealthy organization. So I don't mind if the Humane Society is a wealthy organization and that it can help, homeless pets, but I don't think that their CEOs are taking huge $1 million salaries and letting the dogs go hungry. Anyway, now I'm going to go up to the next post before I get into this stuff right here. All right, I'm going to have to cut this off soon and start doing another one. I've got to run an errand. Okay, so this is the next Q post, and Q says, when was Osama bin Laden killed in Pakistan? Well, I'm not really convinced that that's when he was killed, but hey, let's just say he was. May 2nd, 2011. Where was Osama bin Laden located? Abbottabad. I love that name, Abbottabad. I wish I lived, well, I don't want to live in Abbottabad, but I wish I lived in a place that had as cool a name as Abbottabad. 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 I'm sorry. It's addicting, Abbottabad. Close proximity to Abbottabad. I don't know. I looked at it on a map. I don't know what it's in close proximity to. I didn't see anything that jumped out and slapped me, but it says think logically. Abbottabad. I don't know. Does anybody have any ideas about where Abbottabad is close to? Abbottabad? I'll stop saying it now. Abbottabad. When did AWANs, and now those are the little spies from Pakistan that were working with Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and when did that operation go green? When did it start? 2004. Follow the timeline. I will. What happened during this time with Huma, Valerie Jarrett, AWAN +3? Well, I'm not going to lie to you. I can't decode all of this, but I'm going to do my best at what I do have so far, and maybe you guys can add to it what you know, and we'll all be educated about it. Abbottabad. Okay. Pakistani. That's why I'm making myself laugh. It's a good thing I can amuse myself. Maybe not amuse any of you, but I amuse myself. Pakistani mystery man, Awan's father, transferred data to Pakistani government, ex-partner claims. This is some interesting stuff. Abbottabad. It is. Okay, I'm going to stop. Honestly, I really am. The father of Imran Awan, an IT aide to Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who investigators concluded made unauthorized access to House servers, transferred a USB drive to a Pakistani senior and former head of Pakistani intelligence agency. The father's ex-business partner, Rashid Minhas, alleged. Minhas told the Daily Caller News Foundation that Awan's father, Haji Ashraf Awan, was giving data to Pakistani official Rehman Malik, and that Imran bragged he had the power to change the U.S. president. Oh, really? Asked for how he knew this, he said that on one occasion in 2008, when a USB was given to Rehman Malik by Imran's father, my brother Abdul Razak was with his father. After these names are killing me. After Imran's father's delivery USB to Rehman Malik, 4 Pakistani government intelligence agencies were with his father 24 hours on duty to protect him, he said. Minhas did not say what was on the USB. So the guy, the Awan guy, the mystery Pakistan man that Q has made reference to and Trump has made reference to, passed something on a USB to who did he pass it to? to a Pakistani senator and former head of Pakistani intelligence agency. So that's pretty serious. And no one knows what was on it. Or maybe they do, and they're not saying, I don't know. But it's interesting. And I'm not going to go down and read this because not only are the names painful to read, it's convoluted. And there is so much to all of this stuff. And it's like the whole world is connected. And it's like all of these little rabbit trails everywhere lead to these huge discoveries, which are linked to 1,000 more. Every time you unlock something, you unlock dozens of more trails, and it's overwhelming. So their mission go green, I'm not sure. Well, he's saying 2004. 2004 is when A1s started as an IT in the government. Now, I'm going to go down to here where it says, see if this answers some of our questions, because I grabbed this off the net. Maybe this will answer some of our... Imran worked for Debbie Wasserman Schultz since 2004 and had the password to her devices. During the 2016 election, the White House's Office of Inspector General warned that Imran and his family were making unauthorized access to data. The A1 group was left on the House computer network until February 2nd, 2017, days after Donald Trump's inauguration. Shortly after the IG report came out in September 2016, the caucus server, identified as prime evidence in the cybersecurity case, physically disappeared. Wasserman Schultz declined to fire Imran, despite knowing he was suspected of cybersecurity violations, even though she had just lost her job as DNC chair after its anemic handling of its data breach. After Imran was banned from the network, he left a laptop with the username RepDWS in a phone booth. Hang on. The FBI began surveilling the family, but let Imran's wife, Hina Alvi, leave the country. Prosecutors arrested Imran at the airport after he began liquidating assets. A former business partner of Imran, and by the way, he was not vetted at all. There was no security done on him whatsoever. A former business partner of Imran's father says the father handed over the USBs of data to a Pakistani official and that Imran claimed he had the power to change the US president. Nearly Imran's entire family was on the House payroll at high salaries, despite most of them having no training in IT. Democrats failed to vet them. House Dems hired a fired McDonald's worker as email administrator. Wow, okay, this is news to me. House Democrats hired a fired McDonald's worker as email administrator. Rao Abbas worked for Representative Emmanuel Cleaver and Ted Deutsch. Money from an Iraqi political figure who is a fugitive from U.S. officials. The cybersecurity investigation started after allegedly falsified invoices caught administrators' attention, and the A1's lawyer blamed members. The A1's relatives, colleagues, and tenants said they would do anything for money. Imran's own wife, Hina Alvi, filed a lawsuit in Pakistan in September 2017, alleging he controlled Hina with violent threats. D.W. Schultz said police might be Islamophobic, but Imran was the subject of repeated calls to police by multiple Muslim women. No security clearance. No security clearance. Right. So, follow the timeline, Q is saying. What happened during this time with Huma, Valerie Jarrett, A1, plus 3? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what happened with them. I know that Huma has been with Hillary since she was 19. Anyway, let's go on. This bill right here, he's saying what happened during this time. He leaves a link, and this is the Pakistan Terrorism Accountability Act of 2012. And what is it? It is it provides compensation for deadly acts by elements of the Pakistani military and intelligence service against U.S. citizens. So, provides compensation for deadly acts by elements of the Pakistani military and intelligence service against U.S. citizens. So, let's go back and look at what the next one is. This one Pakistani Foreign Aid Accountability Act prohibits assistance being provided to Pakistan unless the Secretary of State certifies to Congress that, number one, the government of Pakistan did not have any information regarding Osama bin Laden's possible whereabouts on or after September 11th, 2001, or two, if the government of Pakistan did have information regarding Osama bin Laden's possible whereabouts on or after September 11th, 2001, it expeditiously communicated such information to the U.S. government. So this is the Pakistan Foreign Aid Accountability Act, which I will admit I don't fully understand. Secretary of State. In 2000, this was in 2012, the Pakistani Accountability Act. This was in 2011 and 2012, and this one was in 2011. Now, to designate Pakistan under Section 244 of the Immigration and Nationality Act to permit nationals of Pakistan to be eligible for temporary protected status under such section. So this gives them temporary protected status. So, yeah. And Q asks, who is protected? Pakistan nationals. That's who is protected under this. And this actually goes into the fact that aid was cut off to Pakistan in 2010. Let's just take a quick look at it. "60 years of U.S. aid to Pakistan." Get the data. As the U.S. announced, it is to withhold military aid to Pakistan. Find out how much money America has given to the country since 1948. A heck of a lot. So this just goes into the fact that they are withholding. The Obama administration has announced it will withhold more than 1/3 of all military assistance to Pakistan, an aid envelope worth some $800 million. The withheld aid includes funding for military equipment and reimbursements for selected Pakistani security expenditures, including a payment of $300 million for counterinsurgency programs. U.S. aid to Pakistan has a long political history, and this is not the first time money has been withheld. Here, we've pulled out all figures. Okay, U.S. economic assistance to Pakistan peaked in 1962 at over $2.3 billion. So they cut off that aid in 2010. And Q is saying, aid cut off in 2010? Yes, it was. Coincidence? What happened in 2011? Well, 2011 was when Osama bin Laden was killed. And I'm still, maybe, I don't know maybe everybody else is seeing all the connection here. I don't. I do see some connections here, but I don't see all of them. And aid cut off, yes. Coincidence? Apparently not. What happened? But why would the aid being cut off result in Osama bin Laden's death? I don't know. Define exchange. Well, we know what an exchange is. I don't know. I really don't know with this one. And it's another one that I spent a lot of time on and still don't feel that I have really decoded it, because I don't understand the intricate connections here. But I'm going to keep working on it for you guys. I really am. But I'm not there yet. I didn't want to hold up everything because of that, though. But I do have just a couple other things here. My name is Huma Abedin. I'm a Muslim with family ties to terrorist group. My husband is Anthony Weiner, the disgraced sexual deviant who sends pornographic pictures of himself to girls online. I met Hillary at 19, and she never left her side. She calls me her second daughter. I influence every decision she makes. Remember my name. If Hillary is elected president, I will be running the White House. And Muslim Brotherhood infiltrate the Democrats. 6 American Islamist activists who work with the Obama administration are Muslim Brotherhood operatives. And it shows a picture of them there. Let me make this bigger. Oh gosh, where did it go? Okay. And then below it, it has Hillary Clinton, and she's standing beside Huma Abedin's mother. And Huma Abedin's mother, Saliha Abedin, is head of the Muslim Sisterhood. And Huma Abedin here, her mentor was Abdullah Omar Nassif, and I believe that he's head of the Muslim Brotherhood. So he's pretty high up in it. I think he's head of Muslim Brotherhood, if I'm not mistaken. I actually end up getting some of this stuff. There's just so many names and so many connections to keep track of, and it does get a little bit overwhelming for all of us, I'm sure. But I'm going to leave it right there for now. I haven't caught us up with the post yet, and I realize that, but this video's getting long at this point, so I'm going to cut it off, and I'm going to come back. I will upload the second video tonight. It'll be late, though, but it'll be up tonight at some point. So thank you guys for listening. I know that this has kind of been a tedious one. There's just a lot of information here, and but hopefully the next will be a little bit less tedious, certainly less than this. So thank you so much, and I will talk to you guys later. Stay safe.